this is Tulika Banerjee from Forensic Science Unit, SGTB Khalsa College, University of Delhi, presenting this module on behalf of Ritu Sharma, Assistant Professor, Sanchi University of Buddhist Indic Studies, Bhopal. I am delighted to present this lecture on social problems in India, which is taught in BA second semester. Before we start with introduction of this chapter, let's look at the other modules we will study in this chapter. Module number 1 is regarding prostitution in India. Module 2 is regarding bonded labor. Module 3 is regarding child labor. And the last module, that is module number 4, is regarding the conclusion. Students, let us now start first with introduction, which will give a brief overview of today's lecture. Introduction. India is one of the developing nations of the modern world. It has become an independent country, a republic, more than a half century ago. During this period, the country has been engaged in efforts to attain development and growth in various areas such as building infrastructure, production of food grains, science and technology, and spread of education. The life expectancy has increased and many diseases have been controlled. However, there are many areas in which Indian society is experiencing a variety of problems. Some of these problems have their roots in our colonial past, while others are related to demographic changes, socio-political conditions, and cultural processes. This chapter tries to acquaint you with some of the problems and the psychological factors involved in them. Prostitution refers to the sexual behavior of a female outside or without wedlock on a commercial basis. Prostitution is regarded as a vice, a sinful or degrading indulgence for a natural appetite. It is a moral problem. Prostitution is forbidden by religious and civic groups. It is also prohibited by law in some societies. A prostitute and her pimp are vetted with a mixture of pity, scorn, fascination, and persecution. Prostitution often results into drug addiction, scandal, venereal diseases, AIDS, and deterioration of the neighborhood in which it occurs. A sociological analysis of prostitution calls for understanding of its persistence and its causes. It is ubiquitous institution. It is deplorable in the eyes of all. However, in some societies, it has been legitimized, whereas in others it is prohibited both legally and morally. It involves a high degree of sexual promiscuity that fulfills no publicly recognized societal goal. Prostitution may be defined as engaging in a primary contact in a secondary relationship. Promiscuity means willingly indulging in sexual contact with numerous persons and even with strangers. A prostitute sells her sexual favors without any emotional attachment but for economic gain. The sexual relation between the buyer and the seller is illegitimate, ephemeral, and condemned. The causes of prostitution may be varied, but psychological and sociological factors are important. Sex is used for various ulterior purposes, as is the case when pretty girls are employed in stores and charity drives and used in advertisements. These factors lead to promiscuous sexual relations. Alfred C. Kinsey in the year 1948 points out that some aspects of prostitution are useful for certain male individuals. However, this does not mean an advocacy or promotion of this age-old institution. It is found both in unorganized and organized forms. Unions of sex workers and dance bar girls are quite strong in Indian metropolises, particularly in Mumbai. Recently, prostitutes have even formed unions in some big cities and towns. Students, now we will discuss about prostitution in India. It is difficult to find an exact estimate of the incidence of prostitution in India because it is still considered a sin to visit a brothel. There are at least 3 types of prostitutes. The first one, common prostitutes working openly in brothels, private prostitutes, mistresses or keeps of particular individuals who work as singers and dancers, and the third one, clandestine prostitutes who work in secrecy and maintain their respectability and social position. This prostitution is a complex phenomenon. It is directly not clearly visible. Prostitution has become a sort of institution which has various forms. It is practiced in a hidden way. No law can completely eradicate this social evil. Some tangible involvement can be brought about by effective social reforms and a crusade against this. The upper sections of society encourage prostitution in the form of keeps and call girls. Others visit brothels to meet the common prostitutes. The Suppression of Immoral Traffic Act, that is SITA, has not been very effective so far. Recently, homosexuality and lesbianism have gained some ground, though these are not the same as prostitution because the latter is a commercial activity. Homosexuality between 2 men or 2 women is not commercial, and it is by consent of the interacting individuals. However, it is not legal. Some countries have legalized homosexuality. A similar demand has also been made in India. A man keeping another man in perpetual bondage for his selfish and personal desires is a kind of man's cruelty to man, which is not confined to a particular country or a particular region, but is found as a global phenomenon for thousands of years, right from the biblical days to present era. The nomenclature changed from period to period and place to place, such as slave, serf and bonded labor. In India, the type of exploitation of man remained prevalent in the name of beggar and riot for years. The term bonded labor or bandhua mazdoor is of recent origin. Despite the abolition of the zamindari system, land reforms, Bhudan movement, enactment of legislation, that is Bonded Labor Abolition Act 1976, establishment of Panchayati Raj, interest shown by social action groups and spirited individuals from society, lakhs of bonded laborers continue to be exploited and carry the yoke of neglect, suffering and frustration in abject silence. In fact, the system of bonded labor as prevalent in Indian society is a relic of feudal hierarchical society. A considerable interest has come to be shown in bonded labor during the past 2 decades by social workers, social scientists and the government because it is considered incompatible with our social ideal of egalitarianism, with our commitment to human rights. The magnitude of bonded labor is just baffling as lakhs of adult males and females as well as children are condemned to suffering under its yoke. Let us now discuss this concept of bonded labor. We have to understand the terms bonded labor system and the bonded labor. The bonded labor system refers to the relationship between a creditor and a debtor who obtains loan owing to economic compulsions confronting his day-to-day life and agrees to abide by the terms dictated by the creditor. The important term of agreement is that the debtor agrees to mortgage his services or services of any or all of the members of his family for a specified or unspecified period. The relationship built on the agreement is on such unequal terms that while for every labor or service there must be some fair remuneration equivalent to the price of labor in the market, under the bonded labor system, the service is rendered for the debt or in lieu of the interest accruing to the debt. The debtor either works without receiving any remuneration, or if at all there is any remuneration, it is much less than the minimum wage as notified under the Minimum Wages Act or the prevailing rate of market wage. The 1976 Bonded Labor Abolition Act defines bonded labor system as a system of forced labor under which a debtor enters into an agreement with the creditor that he would render service to him either by himself or through any member of his family or any person dependent on him for a specified or unspecified period, either without wages or for nominal wages in consideration of loan or any other economic consideration obtained by him or any of his ascendants, or in pursuance of any social obligation or in pursuance of any obligation devolving on him by succession. The agreement has other consequences too, such as forfeiting the debtor the freedom of employment, denial of freedom of movement in any part of the country, and denial of the right to sell at market value any of his property or product of his labor. The term bonded labor has been defined by the National Commission on Labor as labor which remains in bondage for a specific period for the debt incurred. The Commissioner for Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes explained the term bonded labor in its 24th report as persons who are forced to work for the creditors for the loan incurred either without wage or on nominal wage. Bonded laborers are known by different names in different parts of India. For example, in Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, they are known as Jithams, in Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh as Halts, in Bastar district in Madhya Pradesh as Kabadis, in Hyderabad as Bhagela, in Rajasthan as Sagris, in Bihar as Kamiyas or Kamyantis, in Orissa as Gothis, in Tamil Nadu as Pandyals, in Kerala as Adiyas, Paniyas and Katunaikans, and in Uttar Pradesh as Koltas. Students, our next topic of discussion in this module is causes of bonded labor. Though the main causes of origin, growth and perpetuation of bonded labor system are economic, the social and religious factors also support the custom. The economic causes include extreme poverty of people, inability to find work for livelihood, inadequate size of the land holdings to support family, lack of alternative, small scale loans for the rural and urban poor, natural calamities like drought, floods, etc., destruction of men and animals, absence of rains, drying away of wells, meagre income from forest produce, and inflation and constant rising prices. The social factors include high expenses on occasions like marriage, death, feast, birth of a child, etc., leading to heavy debts, caste-based discrimination and lack of concrete social welfare schemes to safeguard against hunger and illness, non-compulsory and unequal educational system, and indifference and corruption among the government officials. Sometimes exploitation by some persons in a village also compels people to migrate to some other place and seek not only employment on the employer's conditions, but also get protection from influential persons. Religious arguments are used to convince the people of low caste that religion enjoins upon them to serve people of high caste. Illiteracy, ignorance, immaturity, and lack of a skill or professional training sustain such beliefs. Broadly speaking, it may be maintained that bondage originates mainly from economic and social pressures. Now let us discuss how to abolish this system, abolition of bonded labor system in India. First, the constitutional and other provisions. As per Article 23 of the Constitution of India, traffic in human beings, beggar and other similar forms of forced labor are prohibited, and any contravention of this provision shall be an offence punishable in accordance with law. The Supreme Court has ruled in various decisions that bonded labor can be regarded as a form of forced labor and hence is unconstitutional under Article 23. So, this is one of the fundamental rights guaranteed by our Constitution And to give effect to Article 23, Parliament has enacted the Bonded Labour System Abolition Act of 1976. The Act makes system of bonded labour a punishable offence. However, in spite of constitutional and legal provisions, the implementation of law is not up to the mark. Slow implementation and resistance from persons of higher social strata are not letting this evil practice to be completely wiped out. Child labourers are exploited, exposed to hazardous work conditions, and paid a pittance for their long hours of work. Forced to forego education, shouldering responsibilities far beyond their years, becoming worldly wise when their peers have yet to leave the cocoons of parental protection, these children never know what childhood is. Now the questions arise. What is child labour? Here comes the answer in terms of definitions given for child labour. Definition of child labour. Child labour is the practice of having children get engaged in economic activity on part or full-time basis. The practice causes the childhood of the children to be ephemeral and is harmful to the physical and mental development. The child labour problem is not unique in India, but it is worldwide. About 217 million children work, many as full-time workers. It is important to note that not all work done by children is considered as child labour. UNICEF defines child labour differently. According to UNICEF, a child is involved in child labour activities if between 5 to 11 years of age he or she did at least 1 hour of economic activity or at least 28 hours of domestic work in a week. And in case of children between 12 to 14 years of age, he or she did at least 14 hours of economic activity or at least 42 hours of economic activity and domestic work per week. Students, now we will discuss about the most crucial aspect of this module, that is child labour in India and the causes. India is sadly the home to the largest number of child labourers in the world. The census found an increase in the number of child labourers from 11.28 million in the year 1991 to 12.59 million in the year 2001. MV Foundation in Andhra Pradesh found nearly 4 lakh children, mostly girls between 7 and 14 years of age, toiling for 14 to 16 hours a day in cottonseed production across the country, of which 90% are employed in Andhra Pradesh. 40% of the labourers were found in a precious stone cutting sector are children. NGOs have discovered the use of child labourers in mining industry in Bellary district in Karnataka in spite of a harsh ban on the same. In urban areas, there is a high employment of children in the zari and embroidery industry. Poverty, lack of good schools and growth of informal economy are considered as the important causes of child labour in India. The increasing gap between the rich and the poor, privatization of basic services and the neoliberal economic policies are the major causes. This adversely affects children more than any other group. Entry of multinational corporations into industry without proper mechanisms to hold them accountable has led to the use of child labour. Lack of quality universal education has also contributed to children dropping out of a school and entering the labour force. A major concern is that the actual number of child labourers goes undetected. Laws that are meant to protect children from hazardous labour are ineffective and not implemented correctly. A growing phenomenon is using the children as domestic workers in urban areas. The conditions in which children work is completely unregulated and they are often made to work without food and on very low wages, resembling situations of slavery. there are cases of physical, sexual and emotional abuse of child domestic workers. The argument for domestic work is often that families have placed their children in these homes for care and employment. There has been a recent notification by the Ministry of Labour making child domestic work as well as employment of children in dhabas, tea stalls and restaurants hazardous occupations. Our next section focuses on laws against child labour in India. Child labour in India is addressed by the Child Labour Act of 1986 and National Child Labour Project. India has legislation against child labour since 1986, which instead of preventing child labour, allows work by children in non-hazardous industry. The government believes that it is not easy to completely wipe out child labour. It therefore has only tried to improve their working conditions, that is reduce working hours, ensuring minimum wages and providing facilities for health and education. It could be said that the national policy has three main ingredients: legal action focusing on general welfare, development programs for the child workers and their families, and a project-based action plan. Initially, 10 projects were proposed to cover the areas where child labour is prevalent. It was also contemplated in the policy to utilize the ongoing projects for the child workers and their families in order to cover their education, health, job prospects and a study of the socio-economic conditions which compelled these children to work at such an early age. The Union government set up a national authority on October 2, 1993 to eliminate child labour in hazardous industries by the turn of the century. The plan aims at rehabilitating the child workers, giving them education in 15,000 schools in different parts of the country and providing compensation to families whose wards are withdrawn from hazardous jobs. But is this plan merely a vote-catching action to fulfill an independence promise as on August 15, 1994 to rehabilitate child workers at the rate of 2 million a year? Or the government is really serious to eliminate this problem? The seriousness appears to be doubtful. Students, in the end, we know that lately there have been questions rising with the growing importance of mandate of legalizing prostitution in India. While that is certainly not a great solution for the given problems, which requires more of a paradigm shift in the mindset of people, but given the clandestine nature and no regulation of industry, it would certainly be a step towards damage control. Bonded labour in India can be viewed as a product of social, historical, economic and cultural factors. The redress of child labour, agricultural debt bondage and other violations will require an authentic commitment by the Indian government to adhere to its constitutional ban of these practices and to overcome the class-based prejudices. The problem of child labour in the third world countries is not only financial, but is also a socio-economic problem which can be addressed by adopting certain measures for improving the economic conditions of the community and enabling it to provide education and leisure time to the children. At the same time, due diligence is required in effective implementation of child labour legislation. The social problems described deals with different domains of life and are just tip of the social issues affecting our country. It is not possible to get rid of these problems so easily. Solutions to them require efforts of all concerned. Not only the government, but we as citizens of our country are equally responsible for the growth and development of our country. The solutions for these problems require inputs from different disciplines. The role of psychology is prominent as it deals with behavior. Modification of attitudes, feelings and pattern of behavior are significant. Psychologists can contribute by providing strategies for achieving these goals. Dear students, this is the end of our conclusion in which we have recapitulated our chapter about some of the social problems in India. I hope you all have enjoyed this lecture and gained valuable knowledge. I hope you all have understood the underlying concepts of this chapter. Do keep in mind what we discussed today. I'll be back with one more lecture in this series. If you want to learn more and enhance your knowledge, you may log on to our website www.cec.nic.in for MCQ, quizzes, LORs, etc. Make sure you revise the modules frequently so that you master the topic well and take up the exercises. Thank you for your time today. I'll see you in the next lecture. Keep learning and goodbye.